I can do what I want when I want, and I can pick and choose who I work with and who I work for. And I think that's kind of the goal every entrepreneur should have, not money. Because if you chase money, you will chase your tail and go around in a circle. Money will always find you. You need to go to bed at night and sleep and know that you haven't altered your direction in any way, shape, or form for anybody because you stuck by your guns.
I'm Matt Tate, founder of Decimal and fellow entrepreneur. Yes, I'm one of the crazy ones. I've chosen time and time again to hustle my way through that first million. Now, I'm scaling to the next 50. So I know firsthand what the messy middle is really like. And I know that entrepreneurs and leaders like us need a destination for empowerment, community, and encouragement. This is our place. This is After the First Million. All right. Well, welcome to today's episode of After the First Million. I am really excited about today's guest, Robert Irvine. And if you haven't heard of him, he's a world-class chef, entrepreneur, philanthropist. We could go on show host, Restaurant Impossible. One of the things I like most is author of Overcoming the Impossible, How to Lead, Build a Team, and Catapult Your Business to Success. So with that, Robert, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
So before we dive in, Robert and I did a little bit of prep before this, and it's great because he disagrees with a lot of my premises behind this show, which for those of you who know me as a recovering attorney, disagreement is my love language. But before we really get off, I'm interested. I think a lot of people consider it to be a little bit crazy to start your own business, to be an entrepreneur. When did you know, Robert, when you were one of the crazy ones?
So back in 1986, I came to the United States of America from England. I worked, my first job was with Donald Trump and the Taj Mahal, Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Yep.
They started there coming out of the military. And I would say started there. I already had a job in Jamaica, putting 2 hotels together for a year before that. But it was my biggest job working with Trump for 4 years. I ran the biggest casino at that time in probably the country. I wouldn't say the world, but very big. It was doing $784 million a year in revenue and 15 in food and beverage. And he came to me and said, how do I change this to make more money? Instead of giving Petrus away to people that lose $6, $8 million, $10 million, how do I make money? And I said, well, it's really easy. You have to buy futures. Meaning beef, chicken, pork,
right.
Any high expense items. He didn't know how to do that. I did. And I was making at that point somewhere around, my first salary was $35,000. Then it went to $55,000, $125,000, $250,000, and then $4.5 million in bonus.
Little discrepancy there.
Because I took a percentage of the money I saved in purchasing the product, buying futures. That would be the turning point in my career. Shortly after that, I started a company on my own. I got it back all the way up because I think the military, I was in the military for a long time. The military taught me dignity, honor, respect, teamwork, listen, voice an opinion when needed. And if something's not right, correct it through the right channels. So I give all of my props for being a successful entrepreneur and having failed, and we'll get to them too, to the military.
I find it fascinating how many successful entrepreneurs do have that military background and the foundation that can set to be successful later in life. What's interesting to me is, so you took your job with Trump and you leverage it to start your own business.
Yes.
And that was your first time running a company. Tell me about that.
I started at Trump as the executive sous chef number 2. Then whilst I was there, I had a foray into the military feeding program of taking flank steaks and skirt steaks and tumbling them in spices and herbs, fajita, smoky rotisserie, and garlic powder. I'll never forget it. And the people who were tumbling my beef and selling my beef were a hamburger company, the largest in the country. The problem being, about 8 months into really being successful as a side gig, their company went bankrupt based on a total recall of listeria and hamburgers, which, made my company fail because they were doing my product. I then went into another company, Herbs and Spices, that I was already tumbling the meat in, called Irvine Thyme, Thyme. Didn't do very well. I stopped it. It was on online retail sales. I didn't stay long with that. And then I started another company, which was helping people run their business, right? Walking into the companies, hotels, casinos, and watching them for a couple of minutes, a couple of days actually, and then saying, okay, this is what you need to do, and here's what I'll deliver to you. One of the biggest things with business is self-confidence. And I think a lot of people don't have that self-confidence to start a business, although I worked for one of the biggest casino groups at that time. I was very comfortable knowing food. I was comfortable purchasing food. I was comfortable because of my military career leading people. Even though I was a young kid, I was 29, 30 years old, running 1,132 people. Payroll, schedules, and all those kind of things. I worked 18 hours a day. I loved it. I was a junkie for it. But again, I went from building 2 hotels together to running a mega hotel, food and beverage wise, not any other ways, and learning lessons. And you said something really telling there. I used that casino to build my resume, to build my network, to build my infrastructure while I was working there.
I think that's an interesting point you make there of how you use one step as the stepping stone to the next one. And how every kind of path in your journey is a building block. And I think some of that kind of gets lost a little bit today. I want to circle back because you also mentioned self-confidence and how a lot of people don't have the self-confidence to necessarily start a business. You started out consulting and now you've quite literally made famous consulting. Have you found that part of entrepreneurship too is that people who were confident enough to start a business can lose that confidence along the way?
I'm going to take it back a little bit. So when I started I'm going to answer the question, but it's kind of an in-depth answer. Because when I started at Trump, I was very confident in my own abilities. Then I would have Trump come to me and ask me questions directly. That's intimidating. I had a president who I loved and a vice president who was very insecure with them 2 people coming to me and not him. So I had to get over the hump of my boss disliking me because they would rather come to me for the answers and go to him. And I would say, look, number 1, I don't want your job. Number 2, I'm making a lot more money than you. So, it's not about money for me. It's about education and how can I learn to be better than I am. So self-confident, I was always self-confident in my own realm, which was food. Anything with food, buying, purchasing, cooking, that's my world. The thing I was insecure about was dealing with people that were higher up the chain than me. And I don't mean Donald Trump. I mean, it's almost like a blasé attitude of, look, I know more than you, so just let me do my job and you'll look good doing it, right? And it's hard to do that. It's like you as a lawyer saying, oh, just trust me and let me do what I do. But self-confidence, I think, gets shattered as you start a company. You keep getting doors shut in your face, right? Number 1, I've got this great idea. No. And then when you get to that point of 15, 20, 30 doors slammed in your face, then you start thinking, well, why am I doing this? Why shouldn't I just work for one of those people?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest mistake you can make. I told you in my book, you mentioned Overcoming Impossible. I talk about wins and losses. It doesn't matter how many losses you have, as long as you have one win, it negates all the losses. And I had 1, 2, 3, probably 4 or 5 losses before I had one win. And that one win started when I was working at Trump Taj Mahal, because the Navy came to me, US Navy came to me and said, how do we do this? And I said, well, it's really simple. You got to do this, this, this. And by the way, it won't work for you because of this, this, and this. And it went on to build a relationship that I have today with the military, which is huge. So I think self-confidence, using that environment where I was purchasing food, where I was meeting new people. I was in the White House twice a week, while I was still working at Trump. So I get all those dynamics going on at the same time, and it was juggling balls for me, which is exciting.
Yeah. It's kind of funny how many people enjoy and thrive in chaos versus those people who get overwhelmed by it. It's funny as you kind of talk about this, what I find is interesting is as more and more came onto your plate, you started to thrive more and more, which also brought you to continue to seek out more and more, it seems like, through your career. A lot of people kind of reach that point where they're like, all right, I'm going to lifestyle this and cruise. You more used it as I'm kicking the snowball down the hill and let's build it.
Yep. You know, for me, every day, 11 years ago, I started a company. It's in the billions of dollars now. We have 14 companies, 8,000 employees, and I just bought 2 new companies last week, right? Because I see the future of what's happening in technology, in AI, in restaurants, in hotels and cruise ships, in our military, and the feeding platform, and the alcohol platform. You know, everything we do, it ties in together. The common, and this is where a lot of people, I feel, get lost. My core competency is what I do is food. So what surrounds food? Is it plates? Is it cutlery? Is it cups and saucers? Is it sauces? Is it meat products? That's my core competency. And then I go out and say, well, okay, well, how do I deliver that in a mass form, either in a restaurant, which I used to do on TV, or in our military with 2.7 million people 5 times a day around the globe? So I look at strategic positions in saying, well, okay, how can we make it better? I think, and I'm tooting my own horn when I say this, but I think I'm a problem solver. I'm a solution provider. You have a problem, bring it to me, I'll fix it. And that's how I've thrived in my business is, okay, there's an old pun, nothing's impossible, right? That's what I made the brand on.
Yeah.
But I truly believe if you sit down with a group of people that are like-minded, not yes men or women, by the way, that you can put a problem in the table and say, okay, here's a problem. What do you think? And you're going to get 1,000 things come around the table, and then one person, and we've proven this 1,000 times. I'll show you how in a minute. One person will come up with, boom, this is the ideal. And it will just come from people talking. We have a program on our foundation is where we give dogs away to post-traumatic stress, military first responders. And I put 5 puppies in a compound with the person. Out of them 5 puppies, one of them puppies is going to go to the person. We take that out, put it with another 4 puppies, and see if it goes back to that person. If it does, that's the puppy we train you with. It's the same idea when you put a group of people. There's always somebody thinking out of the box instead of the generics. That's the people we attract. That's the people I want. I don't want people to say, oh yeah, what a great idea, Robert. Then why am I paying you? I want you to argue with me and disagree with me nicely, not abusively.
Right way.
And come up with a better thing that nobody else has thought about. Because we started a company 11 years ago, a protein bar. By the way, it's still the only protein bar that's individually owned by a person, meaning me, in the world. Is number 3 right now in the world. So because I made a baked bar. I didn't follow the trend of mixing and extruding and cutting. I want my people to think out the box and what makes us unique and different.
So what I think is interesting here, and there's a lot to unpack, but one thing really stands out because when a lot of people think about being successful, they think about that I am right type person. But when you're talking about having a table of people that have ideas, that requires you as the leader to have a level of humility to say, I'm not going to be the one that has the right answer all the time. And I'm willing to disagree. I'm willing to listen. And humility is not something that is typically talked about in successful people.
You're right. Not many, and I talk about that in the book. Actually, there's 4 characteristics I look for. One of them is not humility, but it's empathetic leadership.
Yep.
Knowing that Matt's mom has autism, and he's having a bad day because his mom's having a bad day, and I've got to recognize that you're having a bad day and say, you know what, Matt, I know you've got troubles with your mom. Go home. I've got you. Don't worry about it. I'm going to pay you if you're gone a month. You're still getting paid. Don't worry about it. I got you.
Yeah.
That's what empathetic leadership is. Understanding the people that work with you. Then comes trust. You trust that I'm going to pay you because that's what we do. We have each other's trust. Egos. There are no egos in the room because if there are, and that's what the biggest thing in business, in my opinion, that makes people fail on Fortune 500 companies down to mom and pop is egos. A guy comes in, brings his team. Nope, this is it. This is the way.
My way or the highway.
He's going to fail miserably. Yep. And the last thing is authenticity. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to share that you don't know something. It's okay to, and I find that in every TV show or every Fortune 500 company, and I do a lot of them. I go in there and I'm like, so what's the roadblock here? And it's ego, beating the chest like a gorilla because you want to be right all the time. And there's no such thing as being right all the time. There's no such thing as running a multi-billion-dollar company and thinking you know it all, because we don't. Anybody tells you do, they're full of it.
Yeah, it's quite frankly just not possible.
Right.
We've got a saying we use with our leadership team and that I talk a lot about when I do coaching sessions with our team at Decimal, which is we like to have strong opinions that are loosely held. If you have an opinion that's worth sharing, I want you to believe in it. But if somebody comes up with a better opinion that they can back and that they feel good about and that, quite frankly, undercuts yours, move on, accept it.
See, I'm of the same idea, except the difference is when I go against big companies, and I do very often, by the way, I love the fight.
Oh, sure.
I make sure that I'm armed with the ammunition to go against it. Anybody can go in and disagree with something. But if you're going to disagree, you better have the backup by it. And I found in big companies, I hire a company, I won't say the name, but it's a big company, to give me the data, up to the minute data to go in. So when they put all these big fancy screens up and they're doing their thing, I'm like, okay, great. Keep your screen up. I'm going to be real 24 hours. This is what happened. I see 24 minutes or 12 minutes or 4 minutes ago. This is what's happening in your arena. And they look at me like, well, how did you get that? And we don't have that. There's different tools in our toolbox of all of us. And I rely on that data because most people are data driven. Show me something that's real. Yes. Don't just tell me something. Anybody can do that. But when it's data driven and I walk in and I say to a company, okay, I can drop 28% to your bottom line in 4 days from now if you leave me alone. And they're like, not possible. And 4 days later, I deliver it. It's about understanding their systems. Why do they do their systems? And how can we make them better? Standard operating procedures for every company, I don't care what company you have, are all very similar because it's just the way business is done forever. And I'll give you an example. An aircraft carrier in 1940 was built this way. In 2024, it's still built the same way. There's just different armaments on it. But underneath, it's the same ship. Why? Because nobody's bothered to change it. And nobody saw what we do with cruise ships. And evolution changes in everything. Just because this is the phone doesn't mean it can't be better, run smoothly, or do more things. And we found that over years. Jeff Bezos is a prime example of that. Elon Musk, look at what he did, 2 weeks ago when he put a rocket booster back into its handles, his grip. I mean, there's always a better, but when you as an entrepreneur go and say, well, I think I can do it better, there's a general perception of, yeah, whatever, dude, no way. And It's just disruptors in business that are making national security decisions today, small companies. Not the Boeings of the world. Yes, they do a lot, but there are small independent companies that are entrepreneurs that are making the difference in our national security.
And I think that's fascinating. Your businesses and your companies touch such a variety of areas of the economy. I mean, you're touching national security, you're touching public service, you're also touching just general consumer buying, you're touching, I'm going to go to Vegas next week. You have a restaurant in Vegas. You have so many layers of society that you touch. And yet also through your platforms, through your show, through your books, you touch people on advising them to be better.
Just before this call, I got off, a friend of mine is a consultant and wrote a book and did all this. And again, he's now lost self-confidence because he lost a couple of customers, right? And I said, look, unless you get up, dust yourself off, go through Yellow Pages or get on the phone to people, you're never going to grow your business. My business is this, is providing solutions to clothing in the military, feeding in the military, drones in the military, nutrition, all those kind of things. So we provide a solution where there are other solutions out there, but we feel we're a better solution for a lower cost at a higher quality, whether that be on a TV show or any of the companies that we deal with. I started a relationship 14 years ago thinking it was going to be a one-year relationship. Here I am 14 years later, still doing the same thing, but a lot larger than I started. So for me, I want to help those that need help the most. And by the way, you may think mom and pop. It's actually not. Mom and pop, yes, small business built America. Entrepreneurship is alive and well. And I don't care about politics, giving you this money, that money, this money. I don't care about that. Entrepreneurship is alive and well, but it doesn't come free. And you know this. As a lawyer, you went to school, my daughter is doing the same thing, criminal justice right now, paid a lot of money to do it. But if you start a company, it's a lot of pavement pounding, it's a lot of knocking on doors, it's a lot of relationship-based, or I believe that entrepreneurship is relationship-driven. Yeah. So before I go and pitch somebody something, I'm like, let's go and have a cup of coffee. Let me listen to what your problems are. And let's see if I can come up with a solution. If I can't give the solution, then I'll find somebody that can give you a solution. You know, and I believe in that. Hey, by the way, Fred, Frank, Jesse, Julie, yeah, I've got this job. If you want to take it, it's yours. You know, but we're also cutthroat, and I don't get that. I never have. I never will. There are better chefs out there than me. My two own corporate chefs are 10 times better than I'll ever be. Can they do what I do? No, I can drop in the middle of Afghanistan and feed 30,000 people with nothing, right? Can they do that? No. But are they better chefs than me? Absolutely. So we all have a niche in our workspace. And I think that's exciting when you come across people that are way smarter than you. You know, I sat down before, I used to have a talk show. It was called the Robert Irvine Show, funnily enough. There's a kicker. But whilst we were trying to get it on air and looking for a production company, I got to meet a young man who used to run Disney, Michael Eisner. And he was all about, I met him in New York City for 2 hours. He was bidding on the show. And I had no control over that. It was whoever was going to get it is going to get it. But I wanted to meet him. And I sat for 2 hours in Roy's restaurant in New York City, just listening to him. How do you run a company of that size?
Yeah.
For 2 hours, I'm like, I don't care about the show. Just tell me, what are the trials and tribulations of dealing with those things? You know what his number one thing was? People. And I think I've learned that. And by the way, 10 years ago, I could never say this, so I'm telling you honestly. I've learned to listen more than talk, because you find out more when you listen.
Oh, yeah.
And when we started the show early on, I would like go in, this is how we're going to do it. I know better. And by the way, I did, but I would never listen to the individual whose restaurant or whose business it was about what their vision was before it failed. And, 10 years later, I've learned to go in, tell me what your problems are, tell me what your actual vision was when you started, and where do you feel it went wrong? Which I can't tell you, Matt, that was really hard for me. But I had to do it.
Is it getting easier?
Most of it, yes, because I understood why they did certain things before going to rip their heads off for doing those things. I never understand where people use credit cards and max out credit cards to start a business. Sorry, I don't. I've done it years ago before the rates went ridiculously. But I was, people that take money on credit card receipts and things like these that I see every day, it just baffles me why and who told them to do it. How did they get to it? And there they are in $500,000 in debt. So I've learned to listen a lot.
Do you feel like, I think I know the answer to this question. Do you feel like listening and improving at that has helped improve outcomes?
Yes, totally. Yeah, I would say, look, there are some times when you have to walk into, and I tell my wife this all the time, sometimes you have to walk into a room, and when you walk into a room, people have to stop. And they're like, he's walked in. Whoever that is, right? When you walk in and you command a room, there's a piece of fear, right? Because they don't know what's coming next. And when you sit down and you just listen and you observe and you're silent, the fear actually grows.
Oh, yeah.
So when I ask 5 questions in any meeting, it's an old interrogation technique that the military uses, 5 rapid questions in succession. By the time I get to the 5th question, you're answering the first question. It's really interesting what people will tell you.
Oh, big time.
Half of it's got nothing to do with business. But it really does, because when they tell me these things outside of the business, it actually affects the business, meaning their family life, their everything that happened to them up until that point.
It's interesting as we talk about this, and I'm going to go back to something that you talked about because I think it ties in here. Your concept of wins and losses. I always joke to people, I grew up playing a lot of baseball, and baseball is my favorite sport. And even as I talk to my kids about it today, one of the things I talk about is I love baseball because it's a great microcosm of business. You can succeed 30% of the time in baseball and be a Hall of Famer. In business, so much is failing and being okay with failing. But when you get that 30%, leading that into success and tying that and understanding when success happens and following it, and when failure is happening and stop it. And I'm interested, as you listen to people, is part of that just helping them also understand how to stop failures before they keep going and see successes for what they are?
There's a twofold answer there. Yes is the real answer, is teaching them when to severely think about stopping. The other part of that is no, because if you've got a solid business plan, in our foundation, we bring veterans in that want to learn cooking and business into food trucks. We teach them literally, I think, 5,500 hours of schooling, 50 small businesses that we put together. They go into a food truck for 5 months, get out all the kinks. They learn about money, about purchasing, about travel, about you name it. Then we put them into brick and mortar. The reason I do that is because there is a pivotal point in business where you feel you're failing. You can't stop then. And by the way, if you're $500,000 in debt, maybe you should stop, or at least pause and think about it.
Right.
But I always say, look, in every business plan, I look at the worst scenarios, because P&Ls, we build a P&L and it's like pie in the sky. It's, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. It's never real. But you have to be as close to reality as possible. My first year, I'm not even going to break even. I'm probably going to lose $250,000, $500,000, whatever. Can I sustain that loss and move on? But most people, when they do business plans and entrepreneurs, don't do that thorough enough. And so I do a DAV, Disabled Veterans Camp, every year of entrepreneurs. I do Shark Tank for veterans. I do all those kind of things. And the biggest thing I say to all these companies that go, I don't care about the product. Product is, if I can put a cup on it, we can sell a cup. Is what have you thought before you get to the product? What makes it unique? And how are you going to deliver this? And why is it better than this? Then we'll talk about the product.
Yeah.
Give me a solid platform that you've thought about the business plan. Then we go to the product. Because the business plan can be a spoon, it can be a cup, It doesn't matter what it is, as long as I sell a business plan, I can sell anything. And that's the biggest thing I find with entrepreneurs. They haven't, and I'm one of them. I went from zero to 95,000 retail locations, and you were on about scaling earlier, which I don't want to steal your thunder on, but I was making protein bars by hand. 18 people, 3 lines, make it by hand. Now all of a sudden, I'm in every retailer there is, and now I can't do it by hand, right? So what do? I tell people they can't have it. I find a company to make me and design me a 400-foot long unit that does all the things that I'm doing by hand, but that takes a year and a half to get right and put in, and $10.5 million later, that was the answer. 300 million bars a year. But then where do you get the funding for that? All these scaling up problems happen, and I didn't use outside money. So, and by the way, I'm not rich, and I am not rich. I bootstrapped all of my companies. I didn't go to the bank for loans. My first company was $400,000 I started, and I can tell you it's way up there right now. And everyone else, we've done the same blueprint. So when you scale, you need more people, but you have to find the right people to be able to scale that business with you. Because believe it or not, you may have the idea, but there are people way smarter out there than me or you, and you've got to attract them.
So I want to make a statement, and then I want to get into our argument on scaling.
I love it.
It seems as you talk that underlying your 4 key traits you write about in your book, the empathetic leadership, trust, ego, authenticity, is also resilience and having a passion for what you're doing. Like that seems to kind of underpin as a theme. Is that off base?
They're the basics you have to have. The 5th one is communication, right?
Yeah.
Unless I can communicate what I'm trying to get from you, Matt, which is I want free lawyer services for the rest of my life. Even if you can't do it, you're now my guy that I'm going to come to for IP, intellectual property, for patents, right? You're my guy. And by the way, that's how I did it. I had one guy who I was in a lawsuit with. I couldn't pay. I said, just stick with me. I'll be able to pay you. By the way, it was not that expensive, but I couldn't pay it. I said, stick with me. He's been with me now 17 years. And I do the same thing. I'm like, okay, we need to patent the name. We need to patent this. We need to patent this. We do this. He does it. You have to be able to find those people. And it sounds like, to me, and I came to this country in 1996. I started business in 1997. And I didn't know anybody. So I took for a ride for $250,000. Somebody stole it from me. Lesson number 1, don't trust anybody. And now I don't. I have systems in place in all our companies. We have one holding company, 13 companies under that holding company, or 14 now, I should say, as of last week. And nobody has the right or the authority, not even the CEO, to write a check, not one, unless it comes to me. And if they write it and it goes to the bank calls me. So there are systems in place that once you get bitten once, you're never going to get bitten twice. Because that's the worst thing you can do, is allow people authority with your money. So I think communication of when you start a business, what are the expectations of that business? What are the expectations of the people? And you have to hold them accountable on that weekly basis or that daily basis or whatever it is. And I can tell you on my phone at 11 o'clock at night, I get P&Ls from every company. And by the morning, they've all got replies to the P&L. So when they wake up, and by the way, if we do a lot of military business, so if I get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning from Korea, my CO gets a call 5 seconds later. I don't care what time it is or what the world we are. That's the culture that we've created in our people. And by the way, they get paid extremely well for that. Here's another thing. I also give people a piece of the company after so many years.
Yeah.
So it's not a paycheck, it's an annuity. If a company sells at this, and this, you walk away with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10%, depending on the level you are. You always find great people when you do that. Always. They don't want a paycheck. They want to see what is their hard work giving them.
They want to be part of something. Yeah. Team, company, culture. Yeah. And I agree. We do equity too. And I think it's important to give people a sense of ownership over not just their role, but over the entire mission and goal of the business. I think you get more out of people for that. And it feels better. So where we started arguing earlier today, we started talking about scaling. And it's a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is going through that messy middle of, hey, you've started your business, you've gone through startup phase, now you're building a real company, and that's different. And it brings out different traits. Not everybody is as good as you are at figuring out, hey, I need to bring in people that are complementary or who are different than me. You've seen a ton of companies. You've done it yourself. Talk about some of your thoughts behind that messy middle, behind scaling, and where people maybe struggle.
Again, I go back to the beginning. I think we never feel that a company is going to get to 50, 100, 200, 300, a billion. We never feel that when we start a company, right? And I can tell you, I didn't feel that the first company, or the second company, I should say, that I started 11 years ago was going to get to a B. So it's easy. I give away percentages based on revenue. So when we sold $5 million worth of product, I was like, yeah, we made the money. Although I hadn't made no money, by the way, because I had to buy equipment. I had to relocate holding the products. So instead of making it in Pittsburgh and transporting it from Pittsburgh, I had to go to New Jersey to put it on the main artery, all those kind of things. There's a point in your company, and only you will know whatever that is, whether it's fuel, whether it's trucking, whether it's, do you buy that next truck? And do you take the leap of faith that you can make that next milestone that you put together? Right. Again, it's self-belief. Instead of selling big bars, we could sell smaller bars for mom and pop instead of bodybuilders. That paid off for me, right? That's what got me, the small bars got me into 95,000 homes, 95,000 retailers, millions of homes. Yeah. But if I'd have stayed with the musclehead bars, maybe it wouldn't have, right? So I took a risk on myself. I didn't borrow money, which is a little different. I used my money. And by the way, you can ask my wife, she's in the other room. I was a nightmare because I was scared to death. I put everything I owned into expansion. I mean, to the point that I had to go, when I wrote the check, I had to go to an emergency room because I thought I was having a heart attack. And it was anxiety. Your self-belief suddenly becomes, am I stupid?
Oh, yeah.
I've been there. And then you have to forget about it. And for those people that are going bigger than me at that point, and you get the money lenders, as I call them, what are you giving up when you buy that or you borrow that money? And that's a huge bone of contention for me. When you borrow money, at what rate are you borrowing the money? And what are you giving up? Because I've never wanted partners that would influence my decisions. When you're scaling and you borrow that money, you're giving away 9 out of 10 times some percentage of your company, which allows somebody or a board of company, a board of directors, to tell you what to do in your company. Then I think you lose excitement about that company when somebody says, oh, I wouldn't do that, Robert, or I wouldn't do that,
Right.
I get building, but you have to be very careful with what you borrow and how you borrow it. I try to give no equity away to my people that work with me, yes, but I've never borrowed money. So I put my house up, I've done all the other things that I've done, but I've never borrowed money from institutions. So therefore I've kept control of everything we do so we own a distillery, right? I buy the bottles. I buy bottles at $1 million at a shot now because it has to come over the water, ship and store and all those kind of things. If you had said to me when I bought a restaurant in the Pentagon, I built a restaurant inside the Pentagon. It was supposed to be $500,000, cost me 2.6. 10 years later, it's starting to make money. But what it did for me in the community of the military opened all my other businesses. Do I do it to make money? Yes, I have to cover my costs and make a little bit. Or do I do it for a bigger picture? What is my end goal in mind? If you'd have said to me, do you want 13 companies? I said, that's stupid. No. If I can sell one for this, I'll be happy. I'm never happy because it's the entrepreneurial spirit that says, oh, we've done this, we'll succeed. Well, why don't we try it with this? Because there's a need.
Yeah.
And we use the same playbook or blueprint to do that. It's really how big are your kahunas to take on that debt? And I told you, I wasn't like kidding. My wife, she'll tell you, she took me to the emergency room, having wrote a check for everything I owned.
I'm interested in that story because when we started, we were doing a prep call. And I said, one of the things I like to talk about is the emotional toll that being a business owner can take and how sometimes it's isolating. Your response was, and I quote, and at the same time, the anxiety created by you taking a risk caused an ER visit to the hospital.
Yep. And
so unpack for me.
So the anxiety for me, and I go back to in a minute, the anxiety for me was because I chose to do that business. My wife wasn't in it. My kids weren't in it.
Yeah.
I chose to put everything we owned on me because I believed. There wasn't a conversation with my wife, which is, by the way, I don't ever agree. Don't do that.
I've been there. I agree with your point 100%.
It's painful. It's painful. That was part of my divorce, by the way.
They never remind you of it either.
Not until you get divorced. Then they do. And I said this before. I went from 1 million to 5 million to 50 million and stupid money. I never expected to get to that point. So that was the anxiety for me. I didn't have anywhere to borrow the money from, right? Except the bank manager who had my house and my $463,000. That was the number. I had a TV show. I was making $4,000 a show. That's a true story. And I said to her, look, I need 10.5 million. And she laughed at me. She laughed at me. By the way, she's still my banker today. I got the 10.5 million, which allowed me to grow the business, right?
Yeah.
But everything was tied to the house and the business and car and everything else. The decision for me to spend the money without talking to my ex-wife was what caused the friction. If I'd have talked to her and said, hey, this is what I'm going to do,
right,
instead of just doing it, it wouldn't have interfered with my relationship.
Communication.
My wife now of 15 years has nothing to do with any of my companies. My business, other than being on the phone at midnight with somebody, never interferes with my business. Very rarely do I get that, by the way. So we have a rule after a certain time, unless it's some very high up position in the military or government, I don't answer the phone. We have a cutoff time. My gym is my time. My home time is my time. My sauna, I have a sauna and cold plunge every night. Don't talk to me. That's my time. We have a separation when we finish work. She has an hour, I have an hour. Then we'll both cook dinner together. So when people say it pays an emotional toll, yes, it does, but no, it doesn't. If you're open-minded with your wife, not like I was, because I wasn't.
Yeah.
My first wife, I should say, my ex-wife. There was no aggravation even when we started the companies. It was only that I didn't tell her that I was, and by the way, it sounds funny, but it was my money.
Yeah.
Right? Ours, but it was mine, right?
Right.
I put it away before I got married. And yes, you can say you're married 50-50. I get that. I totally understand that. I should have had her part of that decision, for sure. But if you're a new entrepreneur and you're starting your business and you have a spouse, that's a decision you both have to make.
Yeah.
Because There's an old saying my mother said, and I used to use this on the show, and if you ever watch the show, you'll hear it. And when poverty knocks at the door, love flies out the window. Meaning, if you got no money, there's going to be sparks. I never had that. Never. Only my initial signing of the business. You're starting a business from scratch and you have no money and you're using a joint credit card. Yeah, it's going to be issues. Yeah. Because when your wife can't put food on the table or buy lipstick or put gas in the car or all those things, it will. But if you're smart about it, it won't. And again, I go back to the planning stage of your business. If your wife knows you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to go to school for 5 years, whatever the number is, and you're going to pay this semester, she knows that. There's no talking about it. When you both say yes, it's going. There is no conversation, because I would always go back to, and most men would, and most women would, by the way, well, we decided this together. This is what we decided. We're seeing it through.
Yeah.
Whether it was you as Amy and me as Matt, we agreed to do something. That's what they agreed to. So if we end up eating, noodles every day for a better future, then it's noodles every day.
It's funny you bring up that story with your wife. I have a similar one, and we're still married 13 and a half years now, and she's very forgiving of my flaws as an entrepreneur. But when I was a practicing lawyer, the firm that I worked with merged. And one morning I get an email that says, hey, we're offering a really long couple-year severance package to the first 2 people or 20 people that walk through the door and ask for it. I immediately got up, sprinted up 10 flights of stairs, collapsed in that doorway and said, I'd like to get it. The only person that beat me to that door was the person that had the office next door. And I accepted it. I signed the deal. And then I called my wife. And it's the last major decision in my life that I have and will make without talking to her and communicating for it or before it. But luckily it worked out well in the end. But I 100% agree with the thought process of communicating beforehand and doing it, because she still does occasionally bring that up with me.
I don't think they ever forget. It's like the elephant, it's always there for something. But I will say this. I make decisions every day. So every January, I have 60 people in a room in Phoenix, Arizona, and a couple hundred on Zoom. And we do our meetings of all our companies. And my wife sits in there and my daughters, just so they understand what I do, right? Because it changes daily. We get offered, once you're a success in one business, I find people sort you out and find you and want you to do not only investments, but also help them do their things. And I do that a lot with big companies to bring out the culture change or to change something that they're doing. I talk to my wife about every day, but it's like she's busy doing her thing. And you can tell till you're blue in the face about everything we're doing. And we have a lot going on. She goes to me and said, oh, I never knew about that. I'm like, well, we did tell you last year, This is happening. Right. Our life changes, our business and entrepreneurs changes so fast.
Yeah.
Whether you make a product or you have a service, that product can change. I remember our first product, we made a pizza, and it was made in Michigan and distributed all over the place. The biggest pizza manufacturer in the United States made my pizzas for me. And then all of a sudden, somebody came in, a big company, bought the spot out, paid marketing money and got rid of Irvine's Pizza. So you've really got to be smart and on the game all the time of, what is the product? If you're going to go against DiGiorno's, and I'm just using that as Pizza Hut pizza or whatever, you're going to lose.
Right.
They've got more money to spend.
100%.
I fought Nestle. Literally, Nestle came after me month 2 of Fit Crunch. You can Google it, Irvine versus Nestle, because my Fit Crunch bar had similar colors to their chocolate bar. It was completely different. But they came after me, and if they'd have won, by the way, they cost $28 million to fight. And luckily, I had insurance on the product, not me. But it's out there. I mean, I won the US, they won Europe. As an entrepreneur, you got to be really careful what space you go into, because these big companies just swallow you up because they can, and your product never gets to see the marketplace because they'll just buy you out.
Right.
And by the way, sometimes that's good if it's worth a multiple, but you're always wondering, what if I succeeded, and what could that multiple be after that?
As you and I have talked, there's one thing that I've found really refreshing and very different from people that have reached your level of success and your personal level of authenticity. I'm interested because for me, it took me a while to figure out who I was, what authenticity really meant for me. And I did a business that worked out well. I did another one that failed. And now I've hit my groove, and part of it is I'm getting older. I'm interested, how is your path to that true authenticity? And I assume it's also evolving as things change, as you change. But what's kind of given you that confidence to just be yourself?
I think my wife, number one, the support I had from her, having failed and realized why I failed. I think they're the two things that make me feel, and achievements, right? And achievements also make you feel comfortable. But I think the humbleness, and again, I'm not always humble, by the way. I say sometimes you have to walk into a room and you have to own that. Yeah. And my wife will laugh at me. She said, "Oh, there he is, the alter ego." But it's not an alter ego. It's actually controlling the room to achieve what you go into that room to achieve. If I go into a room full of 4-star generals and the Secretary of Defense or President of the United States, they're always bigger than me. I have to now stand with them, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's that. But I think being comfortable again, look, money doesn't, and this is how old are you?
41.
I'm 59. Money doesn't drive me. And it used to be 30s and 35, 40. It was about money. When you achieve a level of, I've got enough money to go on vacation, and I'm not worried about this, and I'm not comfort. I think that also settles you down and starts you thinking, okay, I feel good about myself. I can produce for my family. I can do what I want when I want, and I can pick and choose who I work with and who I work for. And I think that's kind of the goal every entrepreneur should have, not money. Because if you chase money, you will chase your tail and go around in a circle. And I say that in my book. If you do the right things, money will always find you. And people don't believe that. But all of my career, I found that if I've done the right things, and maybe I said no to somebody, and I can tell you, there was a mayonnaise offer on the table for me to endorse. It was $8 million. And I said, no, it doesn't really fit with my health and wellness and fitness kind of portfolio of what I do. I said, if you come out with a non-fat kind of healthier version of this, I'm in. And my agent said to me, well, why do you, number one, he was going to get 20% of that or 10% of that. But I would have broke my own rules. And I think once you stand tall in what you stand for, and you say what you mean, and you feel, and this is Matt, feel what you say it in a way that doesn't offend 50% of the country, right? The way we are right now. You can go to bed at night and sleep and know that you haven't altered your direction in any way, shape, or form for anybody because you stuck by your guns. And I think that's for me what I'm lucky. I get to do great things with heads of state, with actors, with all those things. They're just people to me that wear a different uniform. They have a different job. They're no better than me. They may make more money than me. They may have more power than me. But they're still human. And I treat them the same way they treat me. And if they're rude to me, well, I'll say something. If they're kind to me, I'll say thank you. Yeah. And I think it's a respect, again, going back to that military thing, honor, respect, dignity, teamwork, and the ethos of helping each other. When we say team, together everyone achieves more. So if I can help you, then why wouldn't I do that? Yeah. Because down the road, you may turn around and say, hey, Robert, I've got something. Do you want to do this?
Right.
That to me is what the world is. It's not about me. is about we. Because that's the way that we're put on this planet for. And I feel that sometimes businesses are so cutthroat and they want the business. I won't do certain things for a certain amount of money, but I'll say, hey, Matt, there's a job here for 20, 50,000. Are you interested in doing it? Because I'm going to put your name forward.
Yeah.
And then they talk to you and you decide whether you want to do it or not.
Right.
I do that with all my chef friends. I won't do appearances except if it's this. It doesn't help me.
Right.
So, that's what I believe. I'm that way with everybody.
Well, I really like that. I took away, really believe who you are and what you're about, and really know it and believe it and communicate it well. And also the little sprinkling of pay it forward. And I firmly believe in that as well. Robert, I really appreciate your time and I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you. Thanks.
Wow. I have to say, Robert's episode was truly an amazing one for me. I was taking notes the entire time. And I think for somebody like Robert Irvine, who is so famous and has been so successful, to really sit down and distill his story and really what's important to him and what he's learned down into one episode was truly fantastic. But if I had to really take Robert and everything that he said and distill it down into kind of some main bullet points, I would say there were three things that really stood out to me. Number one, embrace independent thinkers on your team. 2, confidence and resilience are non-negotiable. And then 3, humility and listening are your best leadership tools. So going back to number 1 and unpacking these, embracing independent thinkers on your team. I think that's so important. As you grow as a person, as you grow as a company, having people that will push back, that'll push the boundaries, that'll think outside the box, that's only going to improve your ability to be successful and to be happy. And it can be hard because those are the people that aren't the yes men or women, but they're actually going to push you and to challenge you. At Decimal, we constantly are trying to hire people with diverse backgrounds, diverse thinking processes, and skill sets. Having that really kind of true spectrum of human beings and leaders and people working for us has made us a better company. And that's something that Robert attests to as well, which I think is really, really cool. Number 2, confidence and resilience, non-negotiable. Anybody that has run a business, that has been a leader can tell you failure is part of the job. Things will happen. Some things are in your control and some things are out of your control. Heck, we all just got out of a pandemic. That wasn't perfect for everybody. Things are going to happen. You will fail. But if you are confident in yourself, confident in your mission, and if you have that fight, that resilience, hey, bad things happen, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to keep fighting on. That's what'll give you the ability to continue to grow and continue to be successful. And I think that's such a cool part of Robert's story. And then finally, number 3, humility and listening are your best tools. It's almost counterintuitive when we think of, hey, we just talked about confidence, but also being humble and listening. Surrounding yourself with people that have skill sets that complement you means understanding that you're not perfect, that you have things that you're not going to be good at, and that's totally okay. It's also hard for people who are first-time leaders to say like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here, or I need somebody that can help me in this place. Having that kind of humility and then being willing to listen to the people that you bring in is really, really important. The more you trust and empower your team, which also means listening to them and being humble enough to do it, the more successful your company will be, the better your team will be. And I think in general, the more happy and successful you can be. And these are, I think, really great insights from Robert's story. And I think we were all lucky to be able to hear them. Thanks so much for listening. After the First Million is presented by Decimal. To listen to more episodes and find tips to help make running a business easier, visit decimal.com/AFM. Want to join the conversation? Reach out to me on LinkedIn and let's explore the messy middle.